Tonight, we slip into the flickering world of the real Arabian Nights. Here, Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, and the 7 Voyages of Sinbad are less polished fairy tales and more dangerous negotiations with fate. Scheherazade and King Shahryar join them, along with the many legends of the jinn, turning bedtime stories into quiet survival strategies told in the dark. Think less Disney magic and more after-hours bazaar, whispered deals by lamplight, and wishes that come with consequences written in very small print. Before we begin our journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy the stories I share here. And let me know in the comments where you are listening from, and what historical period fascinates you most. I always love hearing from listeners around the world. Now settle in, dim the lights, close your eyes, and get comfortable. We're getting started. In a city far to the east, in a place some old manuscripts call China, but that feels more like the markets and alleyways of Cairo or Damascus, a boy named Aladdin grows up without much hope. His father, a poor tailor, dies when Aladdin is young, leaving him and his mother to survive on almost nothing. She spins cotton thread by candlelight, her fingers moving steadily through the evening hours, selling small amounts in the local market to buy bread and lentils. Aladdin himself spends his days wandering the streets with other boys, learning no trade, dreaming vague dreams of something better, but seeing no clear path toward it. People in the neighborhood know him as idle, pleasant enough, but without direction. His mother worries quietly, wondering what will become of him when she is gone. One afternoon, as Aladdin leans against a wall near the fountain in the square, a stranger approaches. This man wears fine robes that mark him as a traveler from the distant Maghreb, the lands of North Africa far to the west. His beard is neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp and assessing. He stops in front of Aladdin and asks, with unexpected warmth, whether the boy knows a tailor who once lived in this quarter. Aladdin mentions his late father. The stranger's face breaks into a smile. He claims to be Aladdin's uncle, his father's brother, who has spent decades traveling far lands and has only now returned to find his family. Aladdin, who has never heard of any uncle, feels both confused and intrigued. The man embraces him, presses a gold coin into his palm, and promises to come visit his mother the next day. When the so-called uncle arrives at their modest home, he brings gifts, sweet pastries, fine cloth, more gold coins. Aladdin's mother is bewildered but grateful. The stranger spins stories of distant cities, of his regret at losing touch with his brother, and of his desire to help his newfound nephew learn a trade and rise in the world. Over the following days, he takes Aladdin on walks through the city and beyond its gates, always kind, always generous, gradually leading the boy farther from home. Finally, on a journey that takes them into a valley outside the city, the stranger stops at a spot that looks like any other patch of dry ground. His manner changes. He builds a small fire, throws powders into the flames, and chants words in a language Aladdin does not recognize. The earth trembles. A stone slab appears where there was only dust before. The magician, because that is what he truly is, not an uncle at all, grips Aladdin's shoulder and tells him to lift the stone. Beneath it lies a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The boy hesitates, fear tightening his chest. The magician's voice grows stern. He explains that Aladdin is the only one who can enter this cave, that great treasure waits below, and that if the boy obeys, he will be rewarded beyond imagination. He slips a plain copper ring onto Aladdin's finger, saying it will protect him, and orders him to go down, walk through the rooms filled with gold and jewels, but touch nothing, and bring back only an old oil lamp that sits in the farthest chamber. Aladdin, more curious than wise, descends. The steps lead into a vast underground garden lit by a strange glow that seems to come from the walls themselves. Trees grow here, but instead of fruit, they bear clusters of gems, rubies like pomegranates, emeralds like apples, diamonds that shine like stars. Aladdin walks slowly, eyes wide, trying to obey the magician's warning not to take anything. Beyond the garden, he enters a hall where gold coins lie in heaps, and in the center of the room, on a simple niche, rests a battered oil lamp, blackened with age and soot. He picks it up, tucks it into his shirt, and turns back. On the way out, he cannot resist. He plucks a few of the glowing fruits from the trees, filling his pockets with gems he believes are colored glass, pretty but worthless. When he returns to the entrance, he calls up to the magician to help him climb out. The magician, impatient and eager, demands the lamp first. Aladdin, sensing something wrong in the man's tone, refuses to hand it over until he is safely above ground. Rage flashes across the magician's face. He shouts a curse, throws more powder into the fire, and the stone slab slams shut, sealing Aladdin inside. Darkness swallows the cave. The boy is alone, trapped, with no food, no water, no hope of escape. He sits on the cold stone steps, despair settling over him like a weight. In his fear, he clasps his hands together, and as he does, his fingers rub against the copper ring the magician gave him. A sudden rush of wind fills the cave. A figure materializes in the air before him, a being formed of smoke and shadow, eyes glowing faintly, voice like distant thunder. This is a jinn, a creature bound to the ring by ancient magic. It bows slightly and asks what Aladdin desires. Barely able to speak, Aladdin stammers that he wants to go home. The jinn nods. In an instant, the cave disappears, and Aladdin finds himself standing outside his mother's door, the lamp still clutched in his hand, the gems still weighing down his pockets. His mother weeps with relief when she sees him. He tells her everything, and she listens in amazement and fear. Days pass. They have no money, and hunger returns. His mother suggests they sell the old lamp to buy food. Before taking it to market, she decides to clean it, thinking it might fetch a better price if it looks less filthy. She rubs the lamp with a cloth. Smoke pours from the spout, swirling upward, forming into a towering figure far larger and more powerful than the jinn of the ring. This is the jinn of the lamp, a merit of immense strength, and he addresses them with a voice that shakes the walls. He declares himself their servant, bound to obey whoever holds the lamp. Aladdin, still shaken but learning fast, asks for food. Instantly, 12 golden platters appear, piled with roasted meats, fresh bread, fruits, and sweets beyond anything they have ever tasted. From that day forward, Aladdin's life transforms. He sells the golden platters one by one in the market, carefully, so as not to draw too much attention. He and his mother move to a better house. He dresses in fine clothes. Word spreads of a young man of sudden wealth and good manners. One day he catches sight of the Sultan's daughter, Princess Bedrulbudur, as her procession passes through the city. Her beauty strikes him like lightning. He falls deeply in love, though he knows such a match is far beyond his station. His mother laughs sadly when he speaks of it, but Aladdin is determined. He fills a basket with the glowing gems from the cave, still believing them mere glass, and sends his mother to the palace to present them as a gift and request the princess's hand in marriage. At the palace, when the Sultan's advisors see the gems, they recognize their true worth immediately. These are treasures beyond price. The Sultan, intrigued, agrees to consider the proposal, but sets a test. He demands that Aladdin send 40 servants, each carrying a tray of gems, as a dowry. Aladdin returns home, rubs the lamp, and the jinn delivers exactly what is needed. The servants appear, magnificent and silent, carrying trays that dazzle the entire court. The Sultan has no choice but to agree. Yet the Grand Vizier, who had hoped to marry his own son to the princess, delays and schemes. Aladdin, learning of this, orders the jinn to intervene. On the wedding night of the vizier's son and the princess, the jinn lifts the couple's bed and places it in a cold, dark storage room, leaving them terrified and confused, then returns them at dawn. After 3 nights of this, the vizier's son begs to be released from the marriage. Now the way is clear. Aladdin asks the jinn to build a palace for the princess, one more beautiful than any in the world, overnight. By morning, a structure of white marble and gold stands across from the sultan's own palace, with gardens, fountains, and halls filled with light. The sultan is astonished and delighted. The wedding takes place with great celebration. Aladdin and Bedrulbudur live in happiness, and he becomes known as a generous and wise man, beloved by the people. But far away, in the Maghrib, the magician who trapped Aladdin in the cave has not forgotten. Through his dark arts, he learns that Aladdin survived and possesses the lamp. Consumed by fury and greed, he travels back to the city, disguised as a humble merchant. He walks through the marketplace, calling out a strange offer, new lamps for old. People laugh at the foolishness of the deal, but when the magician reaches Aladdin's palace, he finds the princess at home alone. She, unaware of the lamp's importance, remembers seeing an ugly old lamp tucked away in a cupboard. Amused by the merchant's offer, she trades it for a shiny new one. The moment the magician holds the true lamp in his hands, he rubs it. The jinn appears, bound now to a new master. The magician orders the jinn to transport the entire palace, with the princess inside, to a remote desert far away. Aladdin returns home to find nothing but an empty patch of ground where his palace stood. Panic and grief overwhelm him. The sultan, believing Aladdin a sorcerer or traitor, threatens him with execution unless he brings back the princess within 40 days. Aladdin wanders the city in despair, and by chance, he rubs the copper ring still on his finger. The jinn of the ring appears. Though less powerful than the jinn of the lamp, he can still help. Aladdin asks to be taken to wherever his wife is. Instantly, he finds himself in the desert, outside the displaced palace. Under cover of night, he enters through a window. He finds the princess weeping in her room. They embrace, and he explains the full truth about the lamp and the magician. Together, they form a plan. The next day, Bedrulbudur pretends to have accepted her fate. She greets the magician with a smile, offers him wine, and asks him to dine with her. She has prepared the wine with the sleeping powder Aladdin gave her. The magician, overjoyed by what he believes is her surrender, drinks deeply. Within moments, he collapses into a heavy sleep. Aladdin enters, takes the lamp from the magician's robes, and rubs it. The jinn appears, greets his true master, and asks his command. Aladdin orders the palace returned to its original place, and the magician left in the desert. It is done. When the sultan wakes the next morning, he sees the palace restored, gleaming in the sun. Tears of relief stream down his face. Aladdin and Bedrulbudur are reunited with him, and the story of their trials becomes legend. The magician, abandoned in the desert, eventually dies alone. Aladdin keeps the lamp safe, uses it wisely, and over time becomes not only wealthy, but truly wise. He rules justly after the sultan's death, remembered as a man who rose from nothing and learned that fortune, while powerful, is nothing without courage, cleverness, and a good heart. Behind this tale lies a deeper truth about the world that created it. The markets of medieval Cairo, Baghdad, and Damascus were places where a clever merchant might indeed rise from poverty to wealth, not through magic, but through sharp deals, courage to take risks, and sometimes sheer luck. Stories like Aladdin's spoke to a universal dream, the possibility of escaping one's station through a combination of fortune and virtue. The lamp and the jinn are symbols, not just of supernatural power, but of rare opportunities, chances that come to those ready to seize them and wise enough to use them well. The figure of the jinn itself is rooted in Islamic tradition. In the Quran and in the beliefs of the people, jinn are real beings, created by God from smokeless fire, possessing free will and living in a realm parallel to humanity. Some are righteous, some wicked. They can be compelled through the names of God or the seals of ancient prophets like Solomon, who, according to tradition, commanded armies of jinn to build his temple. In folk tales, this theological reality becomes adventure. Jinn trapped in lamps or rings, bound to serve, dangerous if not controlled carefully. The jinn of Aladdin's lamp is vast and powerful, yet still subject to limits, still shaped by rules. This reflects a worldview in which even magic operates within a moral and cosmic order. The magician from the Maghreb also represents something real, fear and fascination with distant lands. North Africa, to audiences in the Eastern Arab world, was far off and mysterious, associated with esoteric knowledge and powerful sorcery. Traveling scholars and mystics did come from those regions, and stories grew around them. The magician's cruelty and obsession illustrate a warning against greed and the misuse of knowledge. He has power, but it brings him no happiness, only bitterness, and in the end, death alone in the sand. Badrolbadour, the princess, begins as a passive figure, the beautiful prize. But in the later part of the story, she acts with intelligence and courage. She devises the plan to drug the magician, showing that even within the constraints of her society's expectations, women could exercise cunning and influence. The story honors that, in its own way. Marjana in the tale of Ali Baba, Scheherazade in the frame story, and Badrolbadour here, all demonstrate that wisdom and quick thinking matter as much as strength or magic. The treasure cave, with its jeweled trees, evokes the deep longing for beauty and abundance. Gardens appear again and again in Islamic art and poetry as symbols of paradise. The Quran describes heaven as gardens beneath which rivers flow, filled with fruit and peace. The underground garden Aladdin finds, therefore, feels like a forbidden glimpse of paradise, dangerous to touch without permission, offering both temptation and test. Aladdin himself is not born noble. He is idle at first, directionless, the kind of boy people overlook. Yet when chance and magic give him tools, he learns to use them. He listens, adapts, shows gratitude to his mother, treats his wife with respect, and becomes generous to the people. The tale suggests that character, when combined with opportunity, can lead to greatness. It's a fantasy, yes, but one that carried hope into the hearts of listeners who gathered in courtyards and coffeehouses, hearing these words by lamplight, dreaming that perhaps, in some unexpected way, fortune might smile on them too. In a world without social mobility by birth, where a tailor's son had little hope of wealth or rank, the story of Aladdin offered escape. The lamp is more than a magical object. It is the dream itself, a dream that, handled wisely, can reshape a life. And so, as the tale closes and Aladdin sits on his throne, the lamp safely hidden away, the lesson remains. Be ready when fortune comes. Act with courage and kindness, and never forget where you began. The boy who once leaned against a wall in a dusty square becomes a king not only through magic, but through growth, love, and the choices he makes when tested. In a town not far from the great cities of the Caliphate, two brothers live very different lives. Kazim, the elder, marries a woman of wealth and becomes a prosperous merchant. His house is large, his storerooms filled with goods, his clothes fine. Ali Baba, the younger brother, marries a woman as poor as himself and makes his living cutting wood in the forest and selling it in the market. Each day, he loads his 3 donkeys with branches and logs, walks the dusty road back to town, and earns just enough to feed his family. He does not envy his brother's wealth openly, but sometimes, when he passes Cassim's grand door, he wonders what it might be like to live without worry. One morning, deep in the forest, Ali Baba hears the thunder of hooves. Instinct tells him to hide. He scrambles up an old fig tree, pulling his donkeys behind a cluster of rocks, and watches from the leaves. A troop of 40 men on horseback arrives at the base of a steep rock face. They are rough, armed with swords and daggers, their faces hard and sun-darkened. The leader dismounts and walks directly to a section of the rock that looks no different from any other. He raises his voice and calls out 2 words. "Open, Sesame." The rock face shudders. A hidden door swings inward, revealing a black opening. The men enter one by one, leading their horses. Ali Baba, barely breathing, watches and waits. After some time, they emerge, their saddlebags now lighter. The leader speaks again. "Close, Sesame." The door seals itself, leaving no trace. The riders gallop away, dust rising behind them. Ali Baba waits until the sound fades completely. Then, heart pounding, he climbs down and approaches the rock. He repeats the words he heard. "Open, Sesame." The door obeys. Inside, he finds a vast cavern lit by a shaft of light from some crack high above. The walls are lined with bales of silk, sacks of gold coins, chests overflowing with jewels, fine carpets rolled and stacked. This is the hoard of a band of thieves, gathered over years of raiding caravans. Ali Baba stands still, overwhelmed. He is not a greedy man, but he is a poor one. He thinks of his wife, his children, the hard labor that wears his body down. He decides to take only what his donkeys can carry. He fills several sacks with gold coins, loads them carefully, covers them with wood, and leaves, speaking the words to close the door behind him. At home, his wife can hardly believe what she sees when he pours the gold onto the floor. She wants to count it, but there is too much. She borrows a measuring bowl from Kasim's wife, planning to measure the coins by volume. Kasim's wife, curious and suspicious, rubs a bit of wax on the bottom of the bowl before lending it. When it is returned, a gold coin sticks to the wax. She shows it to her husband. Kasim's face darkens. He confronts Ali Baba, demanding to know where such wealth came from. Ali Baba, cornered and not clever enough to lie, tells him everything. Kasim's greed flares immediately. He decides to go to the cave himself and take much more. The next morning, he rides out with 10 mules and reaches the rock. He speaks the words, enters, and his eyes widen at the treasure surrounding him. He begins loading his mules with the heaviest, richest items, gold bars, jewelry, rare spices. Hours pass as he works, and when he is finally ready to leave, he approaches the sealed door. But in his excitement and greed, his mind has gone blank. He tries different words. Open barley, open wheat, nothing works. Panic rises. He cannot remember Sesame. He paces, shouts, tries again and again, but the door remains shut. When the 40 thieves return that evening and open the door, they find Kasim inside. They know immediately that their secret has been discovered. Their justice is swift and brutal. Kasim is killed, and his body is cut into quarters and hung inside the entrance as a warning to anyone else who might intrude. When Kasim does not return home, his wife grows frantic. Ali Baba, feeling responsibility and dread, goes to the forest. He finds the cave, speaks the words, and sees his brother's remains. Grief and horror wash over him, but he forces himself to act. He wraps the pieces in cloth, loads them onto a donkey, and brings them home under cover of darkness. Now Ali Baba faces a new problem. If people learn how Kasim died, questions will follow, and the thieves will come looking for whoever else knows their secret. He turns to Morgiana, a clever and loyal slave woman in Kasim's household. Morgiana understands immediately what must be done. She goes to an old cobbler in the marketplace before dawn, offers him gold, and asks him to come with her, blindfolded, to sew something. She leads him through winding streets to Kasim's house, takes him to the room where the body lies, and has him stitch the pieces back together so the body looks whole. Then she leads him, still blindfolded, back to his shop. The cobbler, paid well and confused, asks no questions. A funeral is held. Kasim is buried with the appearance of having died naturally. The household mourns, and Ali Baba quietly moves his family into his brother's larger house, taking in Qasim's widow and Morgiana as part of his extended household. He believes the danger has passed, but the 40 thieves discover that Qasim's body is gone. They know someone else has learned their secret. Their leader orders a search. One of the thieves goes into the town, finds the cobbler, and through a mix of bribery and pressure, convinces him to retrace his steps. The cobbler does not remember the exact house, but he remembers the feel of the streets under his feet. He leads the thief to Ali Baba's door. The thief marks the door with a piece of white chalk, a subtle X, so the others can find it later. But Morgiana, sharp-eyed and suspicious, notices the mark when she goes out to fetch water. She thinks quickly. She takes the chalk and marks several other doors on the street in exactly the same way. When the thieves return that night, they find a dozen marked doors and cannot tell which is the right one. Furious, the leader decides on a new plan. He returns to the cobbler again, this time memorizing the route himself. He finds the house and studies it carefully, committing every detail to memory. The leader then disguises himself as an oil merchant. He buys 19 large clay jars and places one thief armed inside each of 18 jars. The 19th jar he fills with oil to make the disguise convincing. He loads the jars onto mules and arrives at Ali Baba's door just before nightfall, asking humbly for shelter for the night, as is the custom of hospitality. Ali Baba, who does not recognize him, welcomes him in, offers food, and tells him his mules can rest in the courtyard. The jars are unloaded and arranged in a row. Late that night, Morgiana is preparing something in the kitchen when she realizes the household has run out of oil for the lamps. She remembers the jars in the courtyard. She takes a small lamp and walks quietly outside, intending to borrow a little oil from one of the jars. As she approaches the first jar and lifts the lid slightly, a voice whispers from inside, "Is it time?" Morgiana, her heart leaping, realizes immediately what is happening. She keeps her voice steady and low, imitating the leader's tone, and whispers back, "Not yet." She moves to each jar, receiving the same question, giving the same answer. Finally, she reaches the jar that actually contains oil. She returns to the kitchen, her mind racing. She lights a fire and heats the large pot of oil until it is boiling. Then, moving carefully and silently, she carries the pot outside. One by one, she pours the scalding oil into each jar holding a thief. The men die without a sound, unable to cry out or escape. By the time she finishes, all 18 are dead. She returns inside and waits. In the deep hours of the night, the leader of the thieves, thinking the time is right, goes to the courtyard to signal his men. He whispers into the first jar. No answer. He tries the next. Still nothing. He lifts the lid and smells death and hot oil. Rage and horror fill him, but he knows he is trapped and outnumbered if he calls attention. He flees into the darkness, vowing revenge. The next morning, Ali Baba learns what Morgiana has done. He is shaken, grateful, and awed. She has saved his entire family. He offers her anything she desires, but she asks only to remain in his household, safe and valued. Some time passes. The leader of the thieves does not give up. He opens a shop in the marketplace, posing as a merchant, and slowly befriends Ali Baba's son, who often visits the market. Eventually, the false merchant arranges to be invited to dinner at Ali Baba's house. He comes, hiding a dagger beneath his robes. Morgiana serves the meal and watches the guest carefully. Something in his eyes, the way he refuses wine, the way he keeps his hand near his chest, tells her this is no ordinary merchant. She recognizes him. After the meal, as is custom, she offers to perform a dance for the guest. She takes a tambourine and a dagger, which she uses as part of the traditional dance. She moves gracefully, circling closer to the guest. At the final turn, she drives the dagger into his heart. He collapses. Ali Baba and his son leap up in shock and anger, but Morgiana calmly pulls open the dead man's robe, revealing the hidden weapon. She explains who he is. Ali Baba realizes that once again she has saved him. This time, he insists on giving her the ultimate reward. He grants her freedom and arranges for her to marry his son, bringing her fully into the family as an honored member. The remaining thieves, leaderless and scattered, never return. Ali Baba keeps the secret of the cave. He uses the wealth wisely, helping the poor, living modestly, and teaching his children the value of caution, gratitude, and recognizing the worth of those whom others overlook. The story of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves offers more than thrilling twists. It presents a mirror to the society that told it. In the medieval Islamic world, merchant caravans carrying silk, spices, gold, and other precious goods traveled long routes through deserts and mountain passes. Bandits were a real and constant danger. Governments tried to protect trade, posting soldiers at key points, but vast stretches of wilderness lay beyond control. A successful raid could make a group of outlaws wealthy for years. The 40 Thieves in this tale represent that genuine threat romanticized into myth. The magic words "open sesame" have puzzled listeners for centuries. Sesame was a valuable crop, its seeds used for oil and cooking, a symbol of wealth in trade. Some scholars suggest the phrase reflects the way sesame pods burst open suddenly when ripe, scattering seeds. The name became a metaphor for something that opens to reveal hidden riches. In the story, it functions as a password, a secret shared only among the thieves, a detail that reflects the real importance of codes and signals in underworld networks. The contrast between the two brothers speaks to a central theme: greed versus contentment. Kasim, though already rich, cannot resist the lure of even more wealth. His greed blinds him, and in his haste, he forgets the very word that could save him. His death is tragic, but also serves as a moral lesson, repeated in countless folktales across cultures. Excessive desire leads to downfall. Ali Baba, by contrast, takes only what he needs. He does not empty the cave. He remains humble, shares his fortune quietly, and listens to wise counsel. His reward is survival, family, and peace. Morgiana stands at the heart of the tale's power. She is introduced as a slave, a person of the lowest status in the household, yet she possesses intelligence, courage, and decisiveness far beyond anyone else in the story. Twice she saves the family, first by arranging Kasim's burial to avoid suspicion, then by discovering and killing the hidden thieves, and finally by recognizing and eliminating the leader. Her actions are bold, and in some retellings, ruthless. Oiling oil and a dagger in the heart are not gentle solutions. But in the logic of the tale, they are necessary. She is celebrated, not condemned. Her elevation at the end, gaining freedom and marrying into the family, reflects a deeper reality. In Islamic societies of the medieval period, slavery existed, but it functioned differently than in some other systems. Slaves could rise to positions of great influence, especially in households and courts. Freed slaves sometimes became powerful administrators, military commanders, or, as in the Mamluk example, even rulers. Morgiana's story taps into that possibility. It acknowledges that wisdom and loyalty matter more than birth, and that a sharp mind in a low station can change the fate of everyone. The theme of hospitality also runs through the tale. Ali Baba welcomes the disguised thief into his home because custom demands it. In the desert and trade cultures of the Islamic world, hospitality was sacred. To refuse shelter to a traveler could mean death for that person, so even enemies might be offered food and safety under one's roof. The leader of the thieves exploits this, but the tale does not criticize Ali Baba for following the custom. Instead, it shows that goodness must be paired with vigilance. Morgiana's watchfulness complements Ali Baba's kindness, creating a balance. The story also reveals the value placed on cleverness over brute strength. None of the heroes in this tale win through combat. Ali Baba survives by being cautious and lucky. Morgiana wins by thinking faster than her enemies, by seeing what others miss, by acting decisively when action is needed. The tale honors intelligence, especially the kind that stays calm under pressure. In a world where physical power often dominated, stories like this offered a different kind of heroism, one accessible to those without swords or armies. There is a darkness in the tale, too. The deaths of the thieves are gruesome, the dismemberment of Cassim shocking. These elements were not soft in the original oral tellings. Audiences in coffee houses and courtyards expected drama, danger, and justice served in stark terms. The world outside was often harsh, and stories reflected that. But within the harshness, there was also hope. The hope that a poor woodcutter could stumble into fortune, that a slave could become a savior, that wit and courage could triumph over numbers and violence. The treasure cave itself functions as a symbol. It holds the stolen wealth of many victims, concentrated in one hidden place. Finding it is like finding all the lost chances and broken dreams of others, now waiting for someone new. Ali Baba does not see it as his by right. He takes carefully, almost apologetically. His relationship with the wealth is respectful, even fearful. He knows it is dangerous. Cassim sees it as an opportunity to gorge himself, and that perception kills him. The cave, in this sense, is a test of character. It reveals who you are when no one is watching, and unlimited riches lie before you. As the tale ends, Ali Baba lives quietly, the cave's location kept secret, used sparingly to help those in need. The story does not glorify wealth for its own sake. It values survival, family, and the wisdom to know when enough is enough. Morgiana, once invisible, is now central, honored, a matriarch in the making. The thieves, who lived by violence and greed, are gone, their treasure repurposed for good. The message is clear. Fortune favors the clever and the just, but only if they recognize the worth of those around them and act with both courage and restraint. In the retelling of this story across centuries, Morgiana has become an icon. She is one of the most active and competent female characters in the entire 1001 Nights collection. Modern adaptations sometimes struggle with her violence, but in the context of the original, she is celebrated precisely because she does what needs to be done without hesitation. She is not waiting to be rescued. She is the rescuer. And in a literary tradition that often placed women in passive roles, her presence is a reminder that the storytellers knew the truth. Intelligence and bravery are not bound by gender, status, or expectation. They emerge where they are needed, and the wise recognize and reward them. In the great city of Baghdad, during the reign of Harun al-Rashid, there lives a merchant known to all as Sinbad the Sailor. His house stands grand near the riverfront, filled with fine carpets, rare books, and treasures from distant lands. Servants move quietly through courtyards where fountains play, and guests gather often to hear the master of the house tell stories of his youth. But Sinbad was not always wealthy. His fortune came through 7 voyages across dangerous seas, each journey a mix of disaster and miraculous survival. Each return to Baghdad, followed by a vow never to sail again, a vow he breaks every time. The frame of Sinbad's story begins with a poor porter, also named Sinbad, who pauses one hot day outside the merchant's gate to rest. Exhausted from carrying heavy loads through the streets, he mutters bitterly about the unfairness of fate. Why should one man live in luxury while another breaks his back for bread? The merchant, overhearing, invites the porter inside, feeds him, and begins to tell his tale. Over 7 evenings, he recounts his voyages, revealing that his wealth came not from luck alone, but from repeated brushes with death, loss, and terror. Each story carries a lesson, and by the end, the porter understands that fortune demands a price. The first voyage begins when young Sinbad inherits wealth from his father. Restless and eager to see the world, he buys goods, joins a merchant ship, and sails toward the Indies. After weeks at sea, the crew spots a beautiful island, green and peaceful, and they anchor to stretch their legs and cook a meal. They light fires on the beach, unaware that the island is not land at all, but the back of an enormous whale sleeping just below the surface. The heat of the flames wakes the creature. It plunges downward into the depths. Men scramble for the ship, but Sinbad is thrown into the sea. He clings to a piece of driftwood, watching helplessly as the ship sails away without him, his crewmates unaware he is missing. For a day and a night he floats, sun burning his skin, salt stinging his eyes. Finally, currents carry him to a real island, where he drags himself onto the sand, more dead than alive. He finds fresh water, fruit trees, and eventually other survivors from shipwrecks. Together, they build a raft and by fortune are rescued by a passing merchant vessel. Sinbad works his passage, helping with cargo. When the ship docks at a great port, he sells goods he salvaged and returns to Baghdad with modest profit. He vows never to sail again. But after a few years of comfort, the lure of the sea returns. The second voyage takes him to an island that seems deserted. While exploring, he falls asleep in a shaded grove. When he wakes, the ship has left without him. Alone again, he wanders until he finds a massive white dome, smooth and warm. Curious, he circles it but can find no door. Suddenly, the sky darkens. He looks up to see a bird of unimaginable size descending, wings blotting out the sun. This is the ROC, a creature of legend, and the dome is its egg. The bird lands, settling over the egg to warm it. Sinbad, thinking quickly, unwraps his turban and uses the cloth to tie himself to the bird's enormous talon. When the ROC takes flight at dawn, it lifts him high into the air and carries him across the sea to a valley surrounded by steep mountains. The ROC sets down to hunt, and Sinbad frees himself. He finds himself in a deep canyon, the floor littered with diamonds, some as large as his fist. But the valley is also home to enormous serpents, thick as tree trunks, with fangs dripping venom. During the day, they hide in caves to avoid the rocks who hunt them. At night, they emerge. Sinbad spends a terrified night wedged in a crevice, listening to the hiss and scrape of scales on stone. In the morning, he notices something strange. Large pieces of meat fall from the sky, thrown down by merchants on the cliffs above. The meat sticks to the diamonds on the valley floor. Rocks and eagles swoop down, snatch the meat, and carry it up to their nests on the heights, where the merchants wait to retrieve the diamonds stuck to the flesh. Sinbad sees his chance. He fills his pockets and the folds of his robe with as many diamonds as he can carry. Then he lies down, ties himself to a large slab of meat, and waits. Soon, a ROC seizes the meat and lifts him out of the valley. The bird drops the meat near its nest on a mountain ledge. Merchants, expecting only stones, are shocked when Sinbad emerges. After initial suspicion, they welcome him, impressed by his cleverness. He shares some of his diamonds with them and travels with their caravan back to a port. From there, he sails home to Baghdad, richer than before. Again, he swears off the sea. Again, time erodes his resolve. The third voyage begins well, but turns dark. The ship encounters a storm and is blown off course. They land on an island that appears lush and safe. But as the crew explores, they are attacked by a tribe of ape-like creatures, small but numerous and vicious. The sailors flee back to their ship, but the creatures swarm aboard, seize the rigging, and force the ship to sail away, stranding Sinbad and several others on the island. That night, the stranded men take shelter in a large building they find in the forest. It seems abandoned until a giant returns, a cyclops, one-eyed, towering with a mouth full of jagged teeth. He seizes one of the men, roasts him over a fire, and devours him. The survivors huddle in terror. The next night, the giant takes another. Sinbad and the remaining men, No, they must act or die one by one. They heat 2 iron spits in the fire until they glow red. Then, when the giant falls asleep after his meal, they drive the spits into his single eye, blinding him. His roars shake the walls. He stumbles toward them, groping wildly, but they slip past and run to the beach. They build a raft from driftwood and launch it into the waves. The blinded giant, hearing the splash, hurls massive boulders toward the sound. One boulder smashes the raft, killing several men. Sinbad clings to wreckage and is again cast adrift. Days later, another merchant ship finds him, barely alive. He returns to Baghdad with nothing but his life. On the 4th voyage, Sinbad's ship is wrecked in a storm. He and other survivors wash ashore on an island whose inhabitants seem friendly at first. They offer food, but Sinbad notices something wrong. The food makes his companions dull and passive. The islanders are cannibals, fattening shipwreck victims like cattle. Sinbad refuses to eat the drugged food and pretends to be witless. When no one watches him closely, he escapes into the jungle. He lives on wild herbs and berries until he reaches the far side of the island, where he encounters a group of men gathering pepper. They take him to their king, who listens to his story and offers him work and safety. Sinbad spends months there, becoming prosperous again through trade in spices. Eventually, he books passage on a ship heading back toward familiar waters. He reaches Baghdad once more, swearing this time truly to stay. But the 5th voyage calls him. This time, he captains his own ship, hiring crew and buying cargo. All goes well until they anchor near an uninhabited island to gather supplies. There, they discover a massive egg, like the one Sinbad saw on his second journey. Despite his warnings, some sailors break it open out of curiosity and roast the half-formed ROC chick inside. The parent rocs return, and seeing what has happened, attack. They circle overhead, then drop enormous boulders onto the ship, smashing it to splinters. Most of the crew drowns. Sinbad grabs a plank and drifts for days until he reaches an island with an old man sitting by a stream. The old man gestures that he cannot cross the water and asks Sinbad to carry him. Sinbad agrees and crouches down. The old man climbs onto his shoulders, but when Sinbad tries to set him down on the other side, the man's legs lock around his neck like iron. His grip is unbreakable. Sinbad realizes too late that this is the Old Man of the Sea, a demon who enslaves anyone foolish enough to help him. For days, the creature rides Sinbad, beating him, forcing him to gather fruit, never loosening his hold. Sinbad grows weak and desperate. Finally, he gathers grapes, squeezes them into gourds, and lets the juice ferment into wine. He drinks a little to regain strength, then offers some to the old man. The creature drinks greedily, becomes drunk, and his grip loosens. Sinbad throws him off and smashes his head with a rock, killing him. Freed, Sinbad is soon rescued by a passing ship. He works as a crewman, diving for coconuts on an island where monkeys live in the treetops. He learns to throw stones at the monkeys, who throw coconuts back in anger, a clever trade. He gathers a fortune in coconuts, sells them at port, and returns to Baghdad. The 6th voyage begins when Sinbad, restless yet again, joins a ship bound for the Far East. A storm drives them onto jagged rocks. The ship is destroyed. Sinbad and a few others reach a desolate shore, where they find a river flowing into a cave. With no other hope, they build rafts and let the current carry them into darkness. The river sweeps through underground caverns, wild and fast. Sinbad's raft overturns, and he is thrown onto a sandy bank inside a vast chamber. The walls glitter with gems embedded in the rock. He realizes he is in another version of the Diamond Valley, but this time there is no way out. He floats on the river again, deeper into the earth, until he loses consciousness. When he wakes, he is lying on a riverbank in a green valley, surrounded by people who pulled him from the water. They take him to their king, who listens to his tale with wonder and rewards him richly. Sinbad marries a local woman, settles for a time, but when she dies and local custom demands he be buried alive with her, he is thrown into a communal tomb. In the darkness, surrounded by the dead, he survives by finding water seeping through cracks and by killing other mourners' spouses when they are buried, taking their food. Eventually, he finds a tunnel dug by a wild animal and escapes to the coast. A ship rescues him, and he returns to Baghdad. A seventh and final voyage is different. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid himself asks Sinbad to carry gifts and a letter to the king of Serendib, far across the ocean. Sinbad, out of loyalty and honor, agrees. He delivers the gifts, is received warmly, and begins the return journey. But pirates attack the ship, capture the crew, and sell them into slavery. Sinbad is bought by a merchant who learns he is skilled with a bow. The merchant takes him to a forest where elephants come to die, a secret graveyard filled with ivory tusks worth a fortune. He orders Sinbad to climb a tree and shoot an elephant so they can harvest its tusks. Sinbad obeys, but feels deep guilt. The next day, instead of a single elephant, an entire herd arrives. They surround the tree, and the largest elephant wraps its trunk around the trunk and pulls Sinbad down gently. It carries him through the forest to the graveyard and sets him down among mountains of ivory, then leaves. Sinbad understands. The elephants offer their ancestors' tusks freely if humans will stop killing the living. He gathers ivory, marks the location, and returns to his master with the news. The merchant is overjoyed, frees Sinbad, and shares the wealth. Sinbad finally sails home to Baghdad, his wandering done. These 7 voyages are more than adventure. They map the real world of medieval Islamic trade. Arab and Persian sailors dominated the Indian Ocean routes from the 8th to the 15th centuries. They sailed dhows, ships with triangular lateen sails that could tack into the wind, carrying spices from the Moluccas, silk from China, ivory and gold from East Africa, and gemstones from Ceylon. Ports like Basra, Siraf, and Muscat buzzed with merchants speaking a dozen languages. Sinbad's voyages reflect this world. Islands of spices, kingdoms in India and Southeast Asia, the dangers of monsoons and piracy, the allure of untold wealth. The monsters rocks, cyclops, serpents, the old man of the sea are imaginative exaggerations of real fears. Storms and whirlpools could destroy ships in moments. Unknown islands might hold hostile inhabitants. Diseases, starvation, and thirst killed as surely as any mythical beast. The ROC itself may have been inspired by stories of the extinct elephant bird of Madagascar, or by exaggerated tales of giant eagles seen in distant lands. The diamonds in the valley reflect the actual gem trade, where merchants risked their lives traveling to remote mines. Sinbad's repeated returns to the sea, despite his vows, speak to the psychology of the merchant adventurer. The profits from a successful voyage could set a man up for life, but the memory of wealth fades and boredom sets in. The sea calls again. This cycle mirrors the real lives of traders who could not resist one more journey, one more chance. Many died far from home. Sinbad is lucky or blessed, but he is also skilled and brave. He thinks quickly, adapts, makes hard choices. The theme of hospitality and custom appears again. Sinbad is saved multiple times by strangers who follow the code of caring for travelers. He repays this by sharing his wealth, by showing gratitude. When he is enslaved, he does not rage uselessly, but looks for opportunity. When faced with the old man of the sea, he uses his wits, not strength. The story values intelligence, patience, and resourcefulness. The end of the 7th voyage is significant. Sinbad does not end with treasure, but with wisdom. The elephants teach him respect for life, and he stops killing for profit. He returns home not driven by greed, but by duty to the caliph and by a desire for peace. His final rest in Baghdad is earned, not through luck, but through lessons learned in blood, salt water, and firelight on foreign shores. The porter who listens to these tales understands at last, wealth is not given, it is survived. And sometimes the greatest treasure is simply coming home alive. Long ago, in a vast kingdom somewhere between Persia and India, two brothers rule as kings. The elder, Shahryar, governs a rich and prosperous realm. His palace rises white and tall against the sky, its gardens filled with roses and fountains, its treasury overflowing. He is known as a just and powerful ruler, respected by his people, feared by his enemies. His younger brother, Shahzyman, rules a neighboring kingdom with similar strength and honor. For years, they live in peace, visiting one another, celebrating festivals together, their bond close. One day, Shahryar sends an invitation asking his brother to come for a long visit. Shahzyman prepares his court, gathers gifts, and sets out with a grand caravan. But on the first night of the journey, he realizes he has forgotten something important in his palace. He rides back alone, entering quietly through a side gate to avoid waking the household. As he walks through the dim corridors toward his private chambers, he hears laughter. He pushes open the door and finds his wife in the arms of a kitchen servant. Rage, grief, and shock flood him all at once. Without a word, he draws his sword and kills them both where they lie. Then he leaves the bodies, mounts his horse, and rejoins his caravan as if nothing has happened. But inside, something has broken. When he arrives at his brother's palace, Shahryar welcomes him with joy, but he notices immediately that Shahzyman is pale, silent, barely eating. Days pass, and his condition worsens. Shahryar grows concerned and asks what troubles him. Shahzyman refuses to speak. One morning, Shahryar announces he is going hunting and invites his brother, but Shahzyman declines, saying he will rest in the palace gardens. Alone, he sits by a window overlooking a courtyard, lost in his dark thoughts. Then, by chance, he sees something that shocks him even more. The queen, Shahryar's own wife, enters the courtyard with 20 of her attendants. At her signal, 10 male servants emerge from a hidden doorway. The women and men pair off, laughing and embracing openly in broad daylight, shameless. The queen herself calls for a particular slave, and they disappear together into the shadows. Shahzyman watches, frozen. When they finish and scatter, he sits back, his mind reeling. But strangely, his own grief begins to lift. He thinks, if even my brother, the great king, suffers this betrayal, then my misfortune is not unique. When Shahryar returns from the hunt, he finds Shahzyman eating again, his color returned, even smiling faintly. Shahryar demands to know what has cured him. Shahzyman hesitates, then tells him everything he witnessed. At first, Shahryar refuses to believe it. Fury rises in him, but also doubt. He insists on seeing for himself. The next day, he pretends to leave on another journey, but doubles back and hides with his brother by the window. The scene repeats exactly as described. Shahryar's world collapses. The two brothers, both now shattered, decide they cannot return to their thrones until they know whether other men suffer the same fate. Disguised as travelers, they wander into the wilderness. By the shore of the sea, they rest under a tree. Suddenly, the water churns, and a towering genie rises from the waves, carrying a locked glass chest. He sets it on the sand, opens it, and lifts out a beautiful woman. He lays his massive head in her lap and falls asleep. The woman sees the two brothers hiding in the tree. She gestures for them to come down. Terrified, they obey. She propositions them both, threatening to wake the genie if they refuse. Horrified and trapped, they comply. Afterward, she shows them a necklace strung with 98 rings, each taken from a different man. She explains that the genie kidnapped her on her wedding night, locked her in the chest, and keeps her at the bottom of the sea. But whenever he sleeps, she escapes and takes lovers to spite him. She adds their 2 rings to her collection. The brothers return to the palace, convinced now that all women are unfaithful, that trust is impossible, that betrayal is woven into the fabric of the world. Shahryar's grief turns to madness. He has his queen and her lovers executed. Then, in his bitterness and rage, he makes a terrible vow. He will marry a new virgin every evening, spend one night with her, and have her executed at dawn before she has a chance to betray him. No woman will deceive him again. His vizier, horrified, has no choice but to obey. The executions begin. Night after night, a girl is brought to the palace. Morning after morning, the executioner's sword falls. Fear spreads through the kingdom. Families with daughters flee to distant provinces. Those who remain hide their girls, dye their hair, dress them as boys. The court grows silent. Nobles whisper in corridors, but no one dares challenge the king. Months pass. The kingdom's future dies one girl at a time. The vizier, who must find each new bride, grows hollow with despair. Then one day, his own eldest daughter, Scheherazade, comes to him with a proposal that stops his heart. She asks him to offer her as the next bride. The vizier refuses, begs her to reconsider, tells her she will die. But Scheherazade is no ordinary girl. She has spent years studying. She has read philosophy, history, poetry, medicine, the sciences. She has memorized 1,000 stories from 1,000 lands. She is intelligent, calm, and she has a plan. She tells her father she believes she can end the killings. Reluctantly broken, he agrees. On the night, she is brought to the king's chambers. Scheherazade asks one favor, that her younger sister, Inarzad, be allowed to stay nearby. The king, indifferent, grants it. The sisters embrace. After the king and Scheherazade are alone together, the night wears on. Just before dawn, Dinarzad, as instructed, calls out softly from the corner, "Sister, if you are not asleep, please tell me one of your wonderful stories to pass the last hours before morning." Shahryar turns to the king and asks permission. He, unable to sleep himself, haunted by anger and sorrow, nods. She begins to tell a story. It is about a merchant who accidentally kills the son of a genie and is sentenced to death unless 3 old men can tell stories strange enough to win his pardon. Schaherazade's voice is calm, her words vivid. She speaks of deserts, palaces, transformations, love and loss. The king listens. Hours pass. Just as the story reaches its most suspenseful moment, dawn breaks. Scheherazade stops mid-sentence. She says, "But the hour is late, and I must not tire you, my lord." The king, caught in the tale, desperate to know what happens next, decides to postpone her execution for one day. That night, she finishes the first story, then begins another, equally gripping. Again, she stops at dawn. Again, the king delays. Night after night, the pattern continues. She tells tales within tales, each one opening into another, like a jeweled box, revealing a smaller box inside. She speaks of Sinbad's voyages, of genies and enchanted princes, of clever women and foolish kings, of love that endures and greed that destroys. As the nights pass, something shifts in Shahryar. At first, he listens only to hear the endings, but slowly, the stories begin to work on him. He hears about kings who are cruel and lost everything. He hears about wives who are loyal unto death. He hears about betrayal, yes, but also about forgiveness, redemption, and the complexity of human hearts. Scheherazade never preaches. She simply tells and lets the tales do their work. Months pass, then a year, then 2. Scheherazade continues, and the king continues to listen. No execution order is given. The people of the kingdom, who once whispered in terror, now whisper in hope. Some nights, the king asks her questions about the stories. Other nights, he tells her pieces of his own pain. She listens without judgment, responds with gentleness. A strange trust begins to grow between them. 1,001 nights pass. During this time, Scheherazade bears the king 3 sons. On the 1,001st night, she finishes her final tale. The next morning, she comes before the king, not with a story, but with their 3 children. She kneels and says, "My lord, I have no more tales to tell. If you wish to execute me now, I ask only that you care for our sons after I am gone." Shahryar looks at her, at the boys, at the woman who has spent nearly 3 years saving not just her own life, but the soul of his kingdom. Tears run down his face. He takes her hands, lifts her up, and says, "You have healed me, Scheherazade. You have shown me that trust can exist, that not all hearts are treacherous, that wisdom and patience are greater than vengeance. I will never harm you. You are my queen, and you will remain so as long as we both live." He abolishes the law of execution. The kingdom celebrates for weeks. Families return from exile. The palace, silent for so long, fills again with music and life. Shahrazi's stories are written down and preserved. She becomes not just a queen, but a symbol, a legend repeated across centuries. The woman who defeated death with words, who turned a tyrant into a just king, who proved that stories are not mere entertainment, but vessels of truth, healing, and transformation. The tale of Scheherazade and King Shahryar is the beating heart of the 1,001 Nights. It is the frame that holds all other stories, the reason the collection exists. Without her, there would be no Aladdin, no Ali Baba, no Sinbad. She is the teller, and in many ways, the creator. Her story is a meditation on the power of narrative itself, on why humans have always needed stories to make sense of pain, to find hope in despair, to connect across the chasms of anger and fear. At its core, Schaherazade's tale explores trauma and healing. Shahryar is a man destroyed by betrayal. His response to kill innocent women preemptively is monstrous, but the story does not present him as simply evil. He is broken. His actions are a twisted attempt to control a world that hurt him, to eliminate vulnerability by eliminating trust. In psychological terms, he is trapped in a cycle of rage and grief, unable to see beyond his wound. Scheherazade does not fight him with weapons or arguments. She does not beg or accuse. Instead, she offers him stories. Why do the stories work? Because they give Shahryar distance from his own pain. He listens to tales of other kings, other betrayals, other outcomes. In these stories, he sees reflections of himself, but also alternatives. He hears about rulers who chose mercy and were rewarded, about trust that was honored, about love that endured trials. Slowly, the stories rewrite his understanding of the world. They do not erase what happened to him, but they expand his view. He begins to see that his wife's betrayal, while real and terrible, is not the whole truth of human nature. Scheherazade herself becomes living proof, a woman of intelligence, loyalty, and courage. This is narrative therapy before the term existed. Modern psychology recognizes that storytelling helps people process trauma, reframe experiences, and imagine new possibilities. Scheherazade intuitively understands this. She knows that lecturing the king about his cruelty will only harden his heart. But if she can make him care about characters in a story, feel their joys and sorrows, fear for their fates, then his frozen heart will begin to thaw. And it does. Shahryar herself is a remarkable character, especially for a tale rooted in a patriarchal culture. She is not passive. She volunteers for certain death because she believes she can change the world. She is educated, which in itself was unusual for women in many historical contexts, though Islamic history includes notable female scholars, poets, and mystics. Her father, the vizier, taught her, which suggests a progressive household. Her knowledge is her weapon, but so is her emotional intelligence. She reads the king's moods, knows when to pause, when to continue, when to let silence speak. Her sister Dinarzade plays a crucial supporting role. She is the audience within the story, the one who asks for tailies, who reacts with wonder and suspense. In doing so, she models for the king how to listen, how to engage. She also provides companionship for Shahryar, a reminder that even in the darkest captivity, love and loyalty exist. The bond between the sisters is quiet but powerful, a counterpoint to the broken bond between Shahryar and his queen. The number 1001 itself carries symbolic weight. In Persian and Arabic tradition, it represents an uncountable multitude, 1001, meaning beyond counting. It suggests abundance, endlessness, the infinite variety of human experience. Shahrezade's stories cover every theme: adventure, horror, comedy, romance, morality, mystery. Together, they form a tapestry of what it means to be human. The king, listening to this vast chorus of voices and experiences, cannot remain locked in his singular grief. He is pulled into a larger world. The tale also speaks to the role of women in the medieval Islamic world. While women faced many restrictions, they were not invisible or powerless. Historical records show women who ran businesses, endowed mosques and schools, advised rulers, wrote poetry, and transmitted knowledge. Scheherazade fits within this tradition of the wise woman, whose influence is indirect but profound. She does not rule openly, but she shapes the ruler. Her power lies in her mind, her voice, and her courage. The theme of storytelling as survival appears in many cultures. Humans have always told stories around fires, in courts, in marketplaces, not just for entertainment, but to preserve knowledge, to teach morals, to bind communities together. In oral traditions, the storyteller held a respected, sometimes sacred role. Scheherazade embodies this. She is a living library, and in saving herself, she saves the kingdom's future. If she had died on the first night, the killing would have continued until the kingdom collapsed. The story also raises questions about justice and forgiveness. Shahryar's crimes are immense. He has murdered countless innocent girls, yet the story grants him redemption. Some modern readers find this troubling, and rightly so. The tale reflects its time, when kings were seen as nearly divine, their authority absolute. The focus is less on punishing Shahryar than on transforming him, on stopping future harm. Scheherazade does not forgive him lightly. She earns his change through 3 years of labor, risk, and wisdom. Her sons, born during the 1,000 Nights, are the final proof. She has given him a future, a reason to care about tomorrow. The ending, where she reveals the children and asks for their care, is strategic and emotional. She offers him a vision of what he will destroy if he continues his madness, his own lineage, his own blood. It is the ultimate story, not fictional, but real, standing before him. He cannot kill the mother of his sons without destroying part of himself. This confrontation with consequence breaks the final barrier. He weeps, repents, and transforms. In the centuries since, Scheherazade has become a symbol far beyond her original context. Feminists see her as an icon of female agency and intelligence. Writers invoke her as the archetype of the storyteller who holds life and death in the balance. Psychologists study her as a model of resilience and therapeutic intervention. Artists paint her, draped in silks, whispering by lamplight, the king leaning close, dawn always just beyond the window. Her legacy is the collection itself. The 1001 Nights exists because she needed stories to survive. Every tale within it is, in a sense, her gift to the world. When we read about Aladdin or Sinbad, we are reading the stories she told to save her life and the lives of countless others. The frame story elevates the collection from mere entertainment to something deeper, a testament to the power of words, patience, intelligence, and hope. As the tale closes, Shahryar becomes a just and beloved king. Scheherazade is honored as a wise queen. Their sons grow strong and capable. the kingdom flourishes, and the stories she told are written down, copied, and carried along trade routes, across deserts and seas, into other languages, other cultures, until they reach us centuries later, still glowing with the light of that first lamp by which she spoke through the night, refusing to let silence or death have the final word. In the stories of the Arabian Nights, few elements captivate the imagination more than the jinn. These beings appear suddenly in pillars of smoke, grant wishes, carry travelers across continents in moments, and sometimes threaten death with a glance. To modern audiences, they might seem like pure fantasy, creatures invented for entertainment. But to the people who first told and heard these tales, jinn were not fictional. They were real, part of the spiritual fabric of the world, mentioned in the Quran itself, and woven into daily life, belief, and fear. The word jinn comes from an Arabic root meaning to hide or to be concealed. These beings exist in a realm parallel to humanity, invisible most of the time, but capable of crossing into our world under certain conditions. According to Islamic theology, jinn were created by God before humans, formed not from clay like Adam, but from smokeless fire. This origin gives them qualities humans lack. They can change shape, pass through solid objects, move at incredible speed, and live for centuries. But like humans, they possess free will. They can choose to follow God's guidance or reject it. Some jinn are righteous, worshiping, and fasting like devout humans. Others are rebellious, aligned with Iblis Satan, and work to mislead and harm people. The Quran mentions jinn in several places. One entire chapter, Surah al-Jinn, describes a group of jinn who overheard the Prophet Muhammad reciting the Quran and were so moved that they accepted Islam and returned to their people to preach. Another passage warns that jinn and humans will both be judged on the day of resurrection, held accountable for their deeds. This theological reality shaped how people in the medieval Islamic world understood the unseen. Jinn were not metaphors. They were neighbors in the cosmos, powerful and unpredictable. In the tales of the 1001 Nights, jinn take many forms and roles. Some are bound to objects, lamps, rings, bottles, trapped there by ancient magic and compelled to serve whoever releases them. This trope reflects older traditions, particularly the legends of King Solomon, known in Arabic as Sulaiman. Solomon, according to both the Bible and Islamic tradition, was granted by God dominion over the wind, the animals, and the jinn. He could command them to build palaces, dive for pearls, and carry out tasks no human could accomplish. When jinn disobeyed or rebelled, Solomon would seal them inside brass vessels, inscribed with the names of God, and hurl them into the sea or bury them in remote deserts. These trapped jinn remained imprisoned for centuries, waiting for someone to break the seal. One of the most famous examples in the Nights is the tale of the fisherman and the genie. A poor fisherman casts his net into the sea and pulls up a heavy sealed copper jar. Curious, he pries it open. Smoke pours out, rising higher and higher, forming into a towering figure with eyes like burning coals. The genie roars that he was imprisoned by Solomon for defying him, and that he vowed long ago that whoever released him would be killed. The fisherman, terrified, thinks quickly. He expresses disbelief that such a massive creature could ever fit inside such a small jar. The genie, insulted, transforms back into smoke and flows into the jar to prove it. The fisherman immediately seals it again. The genie, trapped once more, begs for mercy and promises riches if freed. The fisherman agrees, but only after securing a binding oath. The genie, released a second time, honors his word and leads the fisherman to a magical lake where fish of 4 colors grant wishes. The fisherman's fortune is made. This story illustrates key beliefs about jinn. They are proud and easily offended. They are bound by oaths, especially those sworn in the name of God. They can be tricked if a human is clever and brave. And they are not inherently evil, though they are dangerous. The relationship between human and jinn is one of negotiation, ritual, and caution. In daily life, people took care to say Bismillah in the name of God before entering dark places, empty houses, or bathrooms, spaces believed to be frequented by jinn. Water sources, particularly wells and springs, were especially associated with them. To spill hot water without warning was considered rude, as it might scald a jinn and provoke revenge. Different types of jinn appear across folklore and theology. The most powerful are the Merid, often depicted as towering, muscular beings of immense magical strength. The genie of Aladdin's lamp is a Merid, capable of raising palaces overnight, transporting objects across vast distances, and conjuring treasures. Merid are proud and dangerous, but when bound, serve with absolute loyalty as long as the binding holds. To control a Merid requires either a seal of Solomon, a sacred name of God, or some relic of prophetic power. Ifrits, another category, are associated with fire and malice. They are often described as violent, cunning, and vengeful. In some tales, Ifrits haunt ruins and graveyards, attacking travelers who stray too close. They can possess humans, causing madness or illness. Exorcisms, performed by learned scholars reciting Quranic verses, were believed to drive Ifrits out. One story in the Nights tells of an Ifrit who kidnaps a bride on her wedding night, locking her in a glass chest at the bottom of the sea, yet she still manages to betray him whenever he sleeps. A darkly comic reminder that even the most powerful beings cannot fully control love or desire. Then there are the ghouls, or Gilan in Arabic, desert-dwelling jinn who take on monstrous forms. They lure travelers off paths by imitating human voices, then devour them. Descriptions of ghouls vary, but they are often depicted with animal features: claws, fangs, glowing eyes. In pre-Islamic Arabian folklore, ghouls were greatly feared, and the term survives in English to this day, referring to creatures that consume the dead. Beliefs about ghouls blended with superstitions about the dangers of the desert, thirst-induced hallucinations, mirages, and the very real threat of becoming lost and dying alone. Jinn also have the ability to shape-shift. They might appear as animals, snakes, scorpions, black dogs, or camels. They could take human form, beautiful or monstrous, depending on their intent. A common motif in the tales is a jinn princess who falls in love with a human man, marries him, but warns him never to speak a certain word or look upon her in a certain way. When he inevitably breaks the taboo, she vanishes or transforms, revealing her true nature. These stories echo older mythologies, Greek tales of nymphs, Celtic stories of fairy wives, but carry the distinct flavor of Islamic cosmology, where marriage between human and jinn, while possible, is fraught with danger and rarely ends well. Magic in the world of the Nights operates within a specific framework. It is not random or chaotic. It follows rules, relies on knowledge, and is ultimately subordinate to God's will. The most powerful magic comes from knowing the secret names of God, 99 of which are revealed in Islamic tradition, though some mystics believed in hidden 100th name known only to the prophets. A sorcerer or sage who knew these names could compel jinn, heal the sick, protect against curses, or even, in extreme cases, command the elements. But such power was dangerous. Using it for selfish or evil purposes was considered sorcery, seer, a grave sin, punishable both by earthly law and divine judgment. Talismans and amulets played a major role in everyday magic. People wore inscribed verses from the Quran on parchment, folded into leather pouches, hung around their necks to ward off the evil eye, illness, or jinn possession. Certain chapters, like Ayat al-Kursi, were believed to offer powerful protection. Geometric patterns, symbolic squares filled with numbers and letters, were drawn on walls or carried as charms. These were not considered superstition by most believers, but rather practical applications of divine knowledge. The line between religion and magic was thin and often debated by scholars. Some condemned all such practices as innovations. Others argued that using God's words for protection was not only permissible but wise. Astrology, alchemy, and divination also appear in the tales, often practiced by wise old men or mysterious women in hidden chambers. These arts were imported into the Islamic world from older Persian, Greek, and Indian traditions and adapted to fit within an Islamic framework. Alchemists sought not just to turn lead into gold, but to understand the fundamental nature of matter, believing that transformation was possible because God had built change and potential into creation itself. Astrologers mapped the movements of stars and planets, interpreting their patterns as signs of earthly events. Though mainstream Islamic scholars often criticize this, arguing that only God knows the future with certainty. Sorcerers in the tales are almost always antagonists. The magician in Aladdin, the witches who curse princes into animal forms, the enchanters who trap heroes in enchanted sleep, they use their knowledge selfishly, seeking power, wealth, or revenge. Their magic is effective, but ultimately fails because it is misaligned with moral order. The righteous heroes, often aided by good jinn or blessed objects, prevail. This reflects a worldview in which the universe has a moral structure. Evil may have power, but goodness, patience, and faith are stronger in the end. Sacred objects appear frequently. The lamp of Aladdin, the ring with its lesser genie, the flying carpet, the enchanted horse, the bottles that contain winds or jinn, the swords that never miss, the shields that reflect curses, all are magical, but they are also relics, tied to ancient figures like Solomon, or blessed by forgotten saints, or forged in times when the veil between worlds was thinner. Possessing such an object does not make one powerful automatically. One must know how to use it, must be worthy, must often undergo tests. Aladdin does not become wise simply by rubbing the lamp. He grows into wisdom through trials, mistakes, and guidance. The concept of the evil eye, Al-Ain, runs through both the stories and real-world belief. Envy or admiration, if intense, could cause harm, even unintentionally. A beautiful child, a successful harvest, a prized horse praising these without adding, "Mashallah," what God wills, was believed to invite misfortune. This was not seen as magic in the intentional sense, but as a natural spiritual phenomenon, like static electricity. Protection came through vigilance, humility, and faith. Blue beads, hands of Fatima, written prayers, these were shields against the unseen gaze. Stories also tell of jinn falling in love with humans, leading to tragic or wondrous outcomes. In one tale, a prince is cursed by a jealous jinn to spend half his time as a human and half as stone. In another, a jinn woman bears children to a human man, but when he betrays or mistreats her, she takes the children and vanishes, leaving him broken. These stories serve as warnings. The jinn are not toys or servants to be used carelessly. They have emotions, pride, desires, and long memories. Cross them, and consequences follow, sometimes across generations. There are also benevolent jinn, guardians of sacred places, helpers of righteous travelers. Sufi mystics told stories of jinn who attended their gatherings, invisible listeners drawn by the chanting of God's names. Some saints were said to have jinn disciples, beings who converted to Islam and served the holy man out of reverence. These tales blurred the line between the mystical and the magical, creating a spiritual landscape rich with unseen presence and possibility. The 1001 Nights reflects this cosmology vividly. Scheherazade herself never questions the existence of jinn. She recounts their deeds as fact, weaving them into narratives where human courage, wit, and faith can overcome even supernatural threats. For her original audiences, this was not fantasy in the modern sense. It was a heightened, poetic version of the world they inhabited, a world where the unseen was real, where words had power, where the night held both danger and wonder. Magic in these tales also serves a narrative function. It allows for transformation, for the impossible to become possible. A poor boy can become a prince. A city can appear overnight. A journey that would take months happens in seconds. These are wish fulfillment fantasies, yes, but they also explore deeper truths. They ask, what would you do with ultimate power? How would you handle sudden fortune? Would you be corrupted or remain just? The magic is a tool to test character. In the end, the magic of the nights is not separate from its morality. The jinn, for all their power, are still creatures under God's dominion. The sorcerers, for all their knowledge, cannot escape divine justice. The heroes win not because they are stronger, but because they are wiser, kinder, more faithful. The stories teach that the greatest magic is not found in lamps or rings, but in patience, intelligence, courage, and trust in something greater than oneself. As you drift toward sleep, imagine the world as Schaherazade's listeners knew it, a place where every shadow might hold a presence, every old object a history, every word a potential spell. Not a world of fear, but of mystery and meaning, where the boundary between the seen and unseen was thin, and where stories themselves were a kind of magic, capable of changing hearts, preserving wisdom, and carrying the light of human imagination across the dark vastness of time. As the lamp burns low and the final tale fades into silence, what remains is not just a collection of adventures, but a tapestry of wisdom woven through 1,001 nights. These stories, born in the marketplaces of Baghdad, the caravanserais of Damascus, and the coffee houses of Cairo, have traveled across centuries and continents, carrying with them lessons that transcend their time and place. Now, as we gather the threads together, we can see the deeper patterns, the moral architecture that holds these tales aloft, and understand why they continue to speak to human hearts, long after the world that created them has transformed beyond recognition. At the core of nearly every story lies a tension between greed and contentment, between the hunger for more and the wisdom of knowing when enough is enough. Qasim, in the tale of Ali Baba, already possesses wealth, comfort, and respect. Yet when he learns of the treasure cave, he cannot resist. He loads his mules with the heaviest gold, the rarest jewels, the most valuable goods, and in his frenzy, he forgets the simple word that would free him. His greed literally traps and kills him. Ali Baba, by contrast, takes only what his modest donkeys can carry. He does not return again and again to empty the cave. He uses the wealth to help his family, to live more comfortably, but not extravagantly. His restraint saves him. This pattern repeats across the nights. Those who grasp for everything often lose everything. Those who take carefully, who remain humble even in fortune, tend to survive and even thrive. Sinbad's voyages illustrate this in a different way. Each time he returns to Baghdad wealthy, he vows never to sail again. Yet after a few years of comfort, restlessness and greed pull him back to the sea. The seventh voyage ends differently. After delivering the caliph's message and being enslaved, he encounters the elephants' graveyard. The elephants, instead of attacking, offer their ancestors' ivory freely, asking only that the living be spared. Sinbad accepts this wisdom. He stops killing for profit, gathers the freely given treasure, and returns home for the last time. His final rest is earned not through another haul of riches, but through learning respect, balance, and when to stop. The message is clear. Wealth pursued without wisdom destroys. Wealth received with gratitude and used wisely brings peace. Another theme that runs like a river through the tales is the triumph of intelligence over brute strength. Morgiana, a woman of low status, saves Ali Baba's household repeatedly, not through physical power, but through quick thinking, keen observation, and decisive action. She notices the chalk mark on the door and neutralizes it. She discovers the hidden thieves in the jars and eliminates the threat. She recognizes the disguised leader and kills him before he can strike. In a world where physical strength and social rank often determined outcomes, these stories celebrated a different kind of power, the power of the mind. Scheherazade herself is the ultimate embodiment of this. She defeats a king's murderous rage not with an army, but with stories, patience, and emotional intelligence. Aladdin, too, wins through cleverness rather than combat. When the magician steals the lamp and the palace, Aladdin does not challenge him to a duel. Instead, he and Princess Badrolbador devise a plan involving drugged wine and deception. The fisherman outwits the genie by challenging its pride. Over and over, the Thieves reward characters who think, observe, plan, and adapt. This reflects a deep cultural value. Knowledge, wisdom, and wit are treasures more precious than gold. In societies where literacy and learning were prized, where scholars and poets held honored places, these stories reinforce the idea that the sharpest weapon is the mind. The role of women in these tales deserves particular attention. While the medieval Islamic world was deeply patriarchal, the Nights offers glimpses of female agency, intelligence, and power that complicate simple narratives. Shahryar is the most obvious example, but she is not alone. Morgiana acts with autonomy and courage. Princess Badrolbador, though initially passive, becomes an active partner in reclaiming her life. Other stories feature women who disguise themselves as men to rule kingdoms, women who outwit sorcerers, women who choose their own destinies within the constraints available to them. These are not modern feminist tales, but neither are they stories of helpless victims. They reflect a reality where women, though restricted, still found ways to influence, to lead, to survive, and to shape outcomes. The stories honor intelligence and courage regardless of gender, even if the broader society did not always do the same. Hospitality emerges as a sacred duty throughout the tales. Ali Baba welcomes the disguised thief into his home because custom demands it. Sinbad is saved repeatedly by strangers who offer food, shelter, and passage, expecting nothing in return except that he might do the same for others someday. In the harsh environments of deserts and distant seas, hospitality was not a luxury, but a necessity, a social contract that bound communities together. To refuse aid to a traveler could mean condemning them to death. Even enemies, once under your roof, were to be treated with respect. This ethic appears again and again, and while it is sometimes exploited by villains, the stories never criticize the hosts for following the code. Instead, they show that goodness must be paired with vigilance, that kindness does not mean naivety. The concept of fate, or kismet, weaves through the narratives like a golden thread. Characters often speak of their fortune as written, as destined by God. Yet the stories do not present a purely fatalistic worldview. Yes, Sinbad is lucky to survive his many disasters, but he also makes choices to grab driftwood, to tie himself to the ROC's leg, to refuse the drugged food. Aladdin finds the lamp through a combination of the magician's greed, his own curiosity, and quick thinking when trapped. Fate provides opportunities, but human action determines outcomes. This balance between divine will and human agency reflects Islamic theology, which teaches that God knows all, but humans still possess free will and are responsible for their choices. The stories honor both. Trust in God's plan, but act with courage and wisdom. Magic, as we have seen, operates within moral boundaries. Sorcerers who use power selfishly meet bad ends. The magician in Aladdin dies alone in the desert. The evil enchanters are defeated. The good are often aided by benevolent jinn or blessed objects. Magic in the Nights is not neutral. It aligns with the moral order of the universe. Those who wield it with humility and good intent are rewarded. Those who grasp it for domination or revenge are punished. This reflects a worldview in which the cosmos itself has an ethical structure, where justice may be delayed, but is ultimately inevitable. Even the most powerful jinn are under God's dominion. Even the cleverest sorcerer cannot escape divine judgment. This offers comfort. The universe bends, however slowly, toward justice. Transformation is another key motif. Characters change form Fortunes reverse. The powerless become powerful. The arrogant are humbled. Aladdin transforms from idle boy to generous ruler. Shahryar transforms from tyrant to just king. Even Jinn shifts shapes. These transformations are rarely simple or instantaneous. They come through trials, suffering, learning, and time. The story suggests that identity is not fixed, that people can grow, that redemption is possible. This is hopeful, especially in rigid societies where birth often determined destiny. The tailies whisper, "You are not only what you were born to be. You can change. You can rise. You can fall and rise again." The framed story of Scheherazade holds all these themes together. Her victory is not just personal, it is communal. By healing the king, she saves an entire kingdom. By proving that stories can transform hearts, she validates the role of the storyteller, the teacher, the artist. Her 1001 Nights are a marathon of endurance, creativity, and faith. She never knows for certain that the next dawn will not be her last, yet she continues. This is courage of a profound kind, the courage to hope, to persist, to believe that words and patience can overcome even the deepest wounds. When we trace the journey of these stories beyond their origins, we see their power to transcend boundaries. The 1001 Nights existed for centuries in oral tradition before being written down. Manuscript versions appeared in Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, each culture adding or altering tailies. In the early 18th century, a French scholar named Antoine Galland translated a Syrian manuscript into French, adding some stories he heard from a traveling storyteller. His version sparked a sensation in Europe. The Oriental tale became a fashionable genre. Writers like Voltaire and Goethe were influenced. The Romantic movement drew on the exoticism, the sense of a mysterious, magical East. In the 19th century, British translators Richard Burton and Edward Lane produced English versions, each with their own biases and interpretations. Burton's was more literal and included material considered scandalous at the time. Lane's was more sanitized, aimed at Victorian audiences. Both brought the tailies to English-speaking readers, where they entered the literary bloodstream. The Nights influenced fantasy literature, adventure novels, and eventually cinema. The 20th century saw countless adaptations, films about Sinbad, musicals about Aladdin, ballets, operas, comic books. Disney's 1992 animated Aladdin introduced the story to a new generation, albeit in a highly westernized and simplified form. This global journey raises important questions about cultural ownership, appropriation, and transformation. The Nights belongs to the Arab and Persian worlds, rooted in Islamic culture, shaped by centuries of oral tradition among people whose languages, faiths, and histories are often misunderstood or misrepresented in the West. When these stories are adapted, they are often stripped of their complexity, their moral depth, their cultural specificity. Genies become comic sidekicks. Scheherazade becomes a seductress rather than a scholar. The tailies are exoticized, turned into fantasies of a timeless, ahistorical Orient that never truly existed. Yet the stories themselves have always been hybrid, absorbing influences from India, Persia, Greece, Africa, and beyond. They were never pure or static. They evolved with each telling, each manuscript, each cultural context. Perhaps their greatest strength is this adaptability, this openness to transformation while retaining core themes. The best modern adaptations honor this. They recognize the tailies as living traditions, not museum pieces, and they engage with the deeper meanings, the power of storytelling, the complexity of justice, the possibility of change. What then can we take from these tailies as we prepare to close our eyes and drift into sleep? We can take the reminder that intelligence and patience are powerful. We can take the lesson that greed leads to ruin, but generosity and restraint lead to peace. We can remember that people are more than their circumstances, that a poor woodcutter can become wealthy, that a condemned girl can become a queen, that a tyrant can become wise. we can see that stories matter, that they heal, teach, and connect us across time and space. We can understand that the world is larger and stranger than we often imagine, full of unseen forces, unexpected allies, and challenges that test who we truly are. As Schaherazade's final story ends, she stands before King Shahryar with their 3 sons. She has given him not just entertainment, but a reason to live, to trust, to hope. He weeps, lifts her up, and declares her his queen for life. The kingdom celebrates. The cruel law is abolished. Families return. Life begins again. The stories are written down, preserved, and sent out into the world like ships on an endless sea. Imagine now that you are sitting in that palace as dawn breaks on the 1002nd day. The lamp has burned through the night. Schaherazade's voice has finally fallen silent. The king sleeps, at peace for the first time in years. You rise quietly, walk through the cool marble halls, and step into the garden where the first light touches the roses. Somewhere, a bird sings. Somewhere, a fountain whispers. The world is still full of mystery, still full of danger, but also full of beauty, possibility, and the promise that a single voice, a single story, can change everything. You carry these tales with you now. They are not just words. They are maps, mirrors, and lanterns. They show you distant lands, reflect your own struggles, and light the way through dark times. Whether you are the poor porter wishing for better fortune, or the clever servant saving a household, or the wounded king needing healing, or the storyteller hoping your words will matter, you are part of this tradition now. You listen, you remember, you pass it on. As the final stars fade and the first sun of morning rises, let yourself rest. The stories will be here when you wake. They have waited 1,000 years already. They will wait 1,000 more. Close your eyes. Let the rhythm of camel bells fade into the distance. Let the sound of the sea grow soft. Let the lamp dim and the page turn. Scheherazade has earned her peace, and so have you. The desert sleeps. The palace sleeps. The stories sleep, dreaming of the next voice that will wake them, the next listener who will carry them forward. Sleep now, traveler. Sleep and dream of flying carpets, hidden caves, and the infinite power of a well-told tale. From the shores of ancient Baghdad to this quiet moment, the thread of story has never broken. And as long as there are people who listen, who wonder, who hope, it never will.